Okay, so welcome to another deep dive. And today's topic is honestly pretty captivating.
Yeah,
It's what's going on in Tamil.
right.
It's really interesting. And it all really kind of centers around this protest that happened just yesterday, April 4th, Friday. Um, and, it wasn't just any old protest. This was a big one.
No, not at all. And I think what makes this one so interesting is you've got these two groups that you wouldn't normally expect to be working together, and yet here they are finding common ground.
Yeah, and I think that really speaks to kind of the power of this issue that's brought them together.
Exactly. This isn't just some, run-of-the-mill political maneuvering. This seems like a genuine shared concern.
Right. And so those two groups we're talking about, of course, are TVK.
Right, the Tamalaga Vetri Kazagam, led by Vijay the actor, of
Yeah,
course.
huge star.
Huge, yeah.
And then you've got the SDPI, the Social Democratic Party of India, which has a lot of support among Muslims across the state.
Right. And so seeing those two groups come together, really raises some eyebrows. Like, what's going on here? What's bringing them together?
Yeah, and the answer is this Waqf Amendment bill.
Right.
This is a bill that just recently passed both houses of Parliament. It's just waiting on the president's signature to become law.
Yeah.
So it's right there.
It's on the verge, yeah.
Mhm.
And clearly it's touched a nerve.
Yeah.
Because you've got these groups that, you wouldn't necessarily think would be natural allies coming together to oppose it.
Right. So just imagine, Tamil Nadu yesterday, this huge outpouring of political energy, this mix of a very new party. TVK only launched last year, and they've got this very popular figurehead in VJ, and then this party, the SDPI, which is very much embedded in the concerns of a specific religious minority.
Right. And it makes you wonder, is this the start of something bigger? Is this a sign of how things might shift in Tamil Nadu politics?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's get into the specifics of this protest because it was a start-wide thing organized by the TVK against this Waqf Amendment bill.
Right.
What did it actually look like?
Well, the biggest thing I think was just seeing the SDPI there alongside the TVK.
Right.
This wasn't just, a couple of SDPI members showing up. This was active participation in the protests.
Yeah, and we saw this happening in cities all across the state. Tiruchi, Nagapattinam, Mayiladuthurai. Like this wasn't just isolated to one area.
No, it was a widespread mobilization, and the reports from the ground suggested, good turnout in those places. People were making their voices heard.
Yeah, and I mean, it was very visual,
Yeah.
from what we've seen and heard. There were flags and slogans.
Yeah.
It was a very public display of opposition.
Yeah, no mistaking their feelings about this bill.
And I think it's interesting to hear what the SDPI state president, Nalai Mubarak, had to say about this because he was very clear that their involvement was specifically about the Waqf bill. He wasn't saying, oh, yeah, this is the start of some, big new political alliance or anything like that, at least not yet.
Yeah, he's framing it very much as, we have a specific concern here, and we're working with anyone who shares that concern.
Right. So let's actually talk about the bill then, this Waqf Amendment bill that's
Yeah.
causing all this uproar.
Okay.
Um, what is it in a nutshell? What's it trying to do?
So essentially, this bill changes the rules around Waqf properties.
Okay.
And these are lands, buildings, any kind of assets that are meant for Muslim, religious, or charitable purposes.
Okay. So think like mosques and schools and.
Exactly. Mosques, schools, burial grounds, all sorts of things like that.
Okay.
And they're often managed by Waqf boards.
Right.
So this bill changes how those boards operate, how those properties are managed.
And so what's the problem with that? Why are groups like the TVK and the SDPI so upset?
Well, they see this as the central government overreaching.
Okay.
They feel like Delhi's trying to interfere in something that should be handled by the Muslim community itself.
Right. They're saying this is our business.
Yeah.
Stay out of it.
Exactly. And they're worried that this is going to erode their autonomy.
Yeah. Like it's one thing if it's, people within the community debating, how these things should be managed. But if it's suddenly the central government coming in and saying, no, we're going to do it this way.
Yeah, that's where the concern comes in. It's like someone coming into your house and rearranging your furniture without asking.
Right. Yeah. And it's interesting because this whole protest, it gets even more complicated when you consider the SDPI's relationship with the AIADMK.
Right. They've had quite a close relationship, haven't they?
Yeah. I mean, they've been pretty tight for a while now. And you even saw this in the 2024 Lok Sabha elections when the AIADMK actually gave the SDPI the Dindigul seat.
Yeah, that was a pretty significant move.
Right. It basically helped the SDPI, secure those Muslim votes in that area.
It was a clear sign of cooperation.
Yeah, so you've got that history of working together, and then suddenly you see the SDPI out there protesting with the TVK.
Right, and it makes you wonder, Is this a sign that things are changing?
Yeah, are they starting to rethink those alliances?
Exactly. And there's been some talk about that, even within the SDPI.
Right.
There was a report quoting a senior SDPI member who shall remain nameless.
Right.
But this person was expressing some real doubts about the AIADMK,
Hmm.
specifically about their stance on the BJP.
Right, because the AIADMK, they've kind of been playing both sides a little bit, haven't they?
Yeah, it's been a bit ambiguous, and I think that makes some people in the SDPI nervous.
Yeah, especially with Amit Shah.
Yeah.
The Home Minister recently saying that talks with the AIADMK are ongoing and positive.
Right. You can see why that would raise some eyebrows.
Yeah, if the AIADMK get closer to the BJP, that puts the SDPI in a tough spot
Absolutely.
because they're so opposed to this bill that the BJP is backing.
Right. It's a tricky situation.
So how has the AIADMK reacted to all of this?
Yeah.
Have they said anything about this potential strain in their relationship with the SDPI?
Well, DJ Kumar, who's a leader in the AIADMK, he addressed these rumors and he basically dismissed them.
Okay.
He made this analogy about friends going to different parties,
Right?
saying just because, two friends go to different events doesn't mean they're not friends anymore.
Right.
So he's downplaying the significance of this whole thing.
Trying to smooth things over.
Yeah, definitely.
So it's interesting how everybody's trying to, spin this situation,
Right.
put their own interpretation on it.
It's all part of the game.
Okay, so let's zoom out a little bit and look at the bigger picture in Tamil Nadu. Because
Yeah.
the TVK, as we said, they're pretty new to all of this.
Yeah.
They launched last year. So how are they trying to position themselves in this political landscape?
Well, it seems like they're really focused on minority rights.
Okay.
They're positioning themselves as the champions of those communities and also as a party that's willing to challenge the status quo.
Okay.
And, we saw this early on with their opposition to the CAA.
Right.
That was a clear signal of where they stood.
So for them, having the SDPI join their protest, it's a big deal.
Oh, absolutely. It gives them legitimacy.
Right.
It shows that they're not just talking the talk, they're walking the walk.
Right. And it shows that they're a force to be reckoned with.
Yeah, other parties can't ignore them anymore.
And what about the AIADMK? Where do they stand in all of this? Because they've also said that they oppose the Waqf bill. They even passed a resolution against it in the state assembly.
Right.
But it doesn't seem like that's really translated into getting more support from Muslim voters.
No, you're right. And I think that comes down to perception.
Okay.
They might be saying the right things, but are people really convinced that they mean it?
Right.
Are they seen as truly committed to minority rights?
And there was this political observer, Nagor Rizwan, who made a really interesting point.
Oh, yeah. What was that?
He said that the TVK, because they're out there protesting, they're seen as more genuinely invested in protecting minority rights than the AIADMK.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Right, because the AIADMK, they're kind of just doing the official stuff.
Right.
The resolutions and statements.
Right.
But the TVK are actually out there on the streets with the people.
It's a different level of commitment.
Right. And of course, we can't forget the DMK. They're the ruling party. And they've also come out strongly against this WACO bill.
Right.
Stalin, the
Yeah.
chief minister, even said they're going to challenge it in the Supreme Court.
Yeah, they're not messing around.
And the DMK have always had a lot of support from Muslim voters.
Traditionally, yeah.
So how do you think this whole situation with the TVK and the SDPI could affect that? Could it change things?
Well, I think it has the potential to.
Okay.
The TVK is showing that they're a serious contender.
Right.
And they're attracting attention from minority voters.
Right. And as Rizwan said, you can't just dismiss them as being in the BJP's pocket.
Exactly. That argument doesn't work anymore.
So the DMK, they can't just rest on their laurels.
Mhm.
They have to actually work for those votes.
Yeah, the competition is heating up.
And it's not just the TVK and the SDPI.
Mhm.
There were even people from the MJK, the Manathenya Makal Kachi,
Mm-hmm.
another Muslim party.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they were seeing the protest too.
Huh. So it seems like there's a real sense of solidarity on this issue.
Yeah, it looks like it, but then it gets complicated again because the MJK leader, Tamimun Ansari, he's actually criticized both the TVK and the AIADMK.
Oh, wow. So even within this, shared opposition to the bill, there's still a lot of division.
Yeah, it's not so simple.
No, it never is.
So where does all of this leave us? Does this protest mean that the SDPI is breaking up with the AIADMK?
I don't think we can say that for sure.
Okay.
I mean, Nali Mubarak was very careful about how he worded things.
Right.
He emphasized that this was about the Waqf bill and nothing more.
Okay.
But I think it's clear that there are tensions there,
Yeah.
especially within the SDPI.
Right. They're not all on the same page about the AIADMK.
Exactly. And AIADMK's response while they're trying to brush it off,
Right.
it doesn't necessarily mean that everything's fine.
Yeah, so it feels like things are in flux.
Definitely.
And with the 2026 assembly elections coming up,
Right.
it's going to be really interesting to see how all of this plays out.
Oh, absolutely. Anything could happen.
So just to recap, we've got this protest, the TVK and the SDPI teaming up against the Waqf bill.
Right.
It's raised all these questions about the SDPI's relationship with the AIADMK.
Yeah, and it's got everyone wondering what's next for Tamil Nadu politics.
Right, because this one issue, it's really shaken things up.
It has. It's exposed these fault lines.
Right, and it makes you realize that, even in a place like Tamil Nadu, where there are these long-standing political alliances and rivalries, something like this can come along and completely change the game.
Yeah, it's a reminder that things are never static.
Right, and that sometimes a single issue can be all it takes to spark a major realignment.
Absolutely.
So it's definitely something to keep an eye on.
For sure.
All right, well, that's our deep dive for today. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
And we'll see you next time.
Bye.